we're here today to kind of talk to you a little bit about how to really integrate LinguaFolio into your programs and into your institutes in a way that will kind of help you pedagogically to understand how this really functions. And then Julie's going to show you really how you gather the evidence on the actual LinguaFolio site that comes out of Castles. So we're going to begin here. Do we have a... Actually, I have a little clicker here, but...
I can stand. I'll just
all
follow you along.
Great. I love this cartoon because we often think because we teach something, kids learn. And he says, I taught Stripe how to whistle. And he says, well, I don't hear him whistling. And he says, well, I said I taught him. I didn't say he learned it. And I think oftentimes, you know, teachers that talk about the fact that, you know, I taught that, why didn't they show me that on a test? Well, that's kind of what LinguaFolio tries to get at, is getting that student involved in the learning process. And so we're doing that through the venue of the CanDo Statements, which are aligned with the Proficiency guidelines of ACTFL. So our objectives, we have to start out with can-dos, of course, right? I can explain, this is how you start out every class, every session, so kids can actually measure what they're doing. So your can-dos will be, I can explain how and why successful ACTFL can-do statements can increase learner engagement. I can explain the benefits of can-do statements. I can design curriculum and learning tasks that integrate the can-do statements. I can describe how LinguaFolio Online can be used in programs to guide learners through their learning journey, and I can implement it into my upcoming STARTALK program.
Anything else? Those sound good? Everyone's on board? Thing you want to add? Take off? Well, I can't take off. We picked fun.
One of the things that's really going full guns right now is a discussion between performance and proficiency. And performance essentially is the ability to use language in an instructional setting or in a familiar context. Okay? Because you're able to perform in the language. Proficiency, however, is being able to use the language in any authentic situation and regardless of where, when, or how the language was acquired. So we want to make that language experience and the culture experience expand beyond the walls of the classroom so that we spark that motivation to get kids to want to go on beyond just what they're hearing 48 minutes a day or however long their instruction is. And what we found in the research that we've conducted with LinguaFolio is goal setting is that motivator. So the can-do statements actually came out of you probably know this, joint venture. It originally comes out of the the Council of Europe frameworks, and they developed the can-do statements, and we adopted them and adapted them into the U.S. through the National Council of State Supervisors for Foreign Languages. And finally, ACTFL was on board and said, okay, we need to align these with the proficiency guidelines so we can use them at the classroom level. And they're a wonderful venue really for using as a beginning for backward design, which we're going to show you. So the purpose of the CanDo is really to promote functional use of language and to assist teachers and learners in communicating and assessing what they've learned and how well they've learned it. Going back to what I said originally, getting kids involved in that learning process themselves. And it's to provide learners opportunities to experience language and culture together, interculturality, so that they're no longer separated. If you notice everything that's coming out about the 21st century, we're really shifting a lot of emphasis to teaching for intercultural competence. And it should really be intercultural communicative competence, using language in a way that really helps us to move from being a tourist to being a sojourner, as Byram said. Not someone who already has stereotypes and gets reinforced, but someone who actually is able to communicate, listen to what's going on, and then change their perspective according to what they're learning. Okay? So, Julie.
Yeah, so what is STARTALK LinguaFolio Online? Why is it related to this discussion, what we're doing? And really, it's a place for you to show off what your learners have been doing, right? To integrate what's happening in your programs every day into a space that they can sort of see what those goals are and establish those goals. You can collect evidence of this type of performance for learners to self-assess at what level. Did I meet these proficiency guidelines? Did I not? Am I achieving the specific can-dos of my program? To reflect on that as they're working through it, and a place for the implementation of intentional backwards design. As a program director or instructor, you have to go in and select the specific can-dos that align directly with the curriculum template for your StarTalk program. These shouldn't be different. They should mirror each other, right? They should be exact identification of what those objectives are. And we can target those and make them program specific. So all they see are those 15 or 20. We highly recommend less than that and no more for sure. Right? So you don't want 100 different can-dos in a 2-week or 6-week program. You want to be really specific and intentional about what those can-do objectives are. And so as we're thinking about then, what we want learners to do is work on one piece or a couple different pieces of these passports. And LinguaFolio Online, again, is a place to collect that. And we're not going to talk about the technical aspects. There's another session this afternoon if you're interested in that piece. But we really want you to see that this is where that can happen and where that collection of this type of evidence really works, right? The mobile application that's new also allows you to do that on the fly in your classroom, meaning you don't have to go to a lab. We want goal setting to happen in real time, and as you'll see, as part of the learning process. And so we're really working to make that tool work for you so that happens. Okay,
So Alice in Wonderland was one of my favorite books when I was young, and this is kind of when my interest started in goal setting. Alice came to a fork in the road. "Which road do I take?" she asked. "Where do you want to go?" responded the Cheshire Cat. "I don't know," Alice answered. "Then," said the cat, "it doesn't matter." Okay? So without a goal, it doesn't really matter. So goal setting it really influences motivation. We know that from all the research that's been done in educational psychology, right? Goal setting. Go ahead and go to the next one. For example, let's use a realistic, authentic example. You received a bicycle, and so now you have to really ask yourself, ultimately, what do I really want to be able to do with this bicycle? Do I want to be an Olympian champion? Then my goals are going to be a little different than if all I want to do is ride my bike to work, or in my case, be able to exercise in my free time. And so your goals really, this is where you put your cognitive efforts when you're in the classroom. If you have a specific goal, you know where you're going. The same thing is true. Let's use the Weight Watchers as an analogy. This is where they got all of this is why they're a absolutely fabulous weight loss organization. They went to the research on goal setting. So it tells you where are you supposed to be at 5'8" and 45 years old. And yeah, I knew that would happen. And then where are you now? Uh-oh. How am I going to get there? Okay, what are the strategies? So what do they give you? A counselor, like a teacher, right? You have to go to meetings, class, and kind of get a formal thing. But really, they're building self-regulation into you so that beyond, when you get to that level, if you ever do, but they make sure you do, then you will continue this. But they also have an accountability factor. It's called the weigh-in. That's what LinguaFolio is. It's the weigh-in. And it tells you right then and there, whoops, I didn't do so well. I need to rethink some strategies that I might be able to use. So here's how I adapted this to our program, our student program. We also use this for our teacher program. They're stamps. And as Julie mentioned, you don't want to have a ton of these, okay? This was for our students. So our students are pure novice Chinese learners. It's an immersion residential program, 2 weeks. And so we came up with, here are the things we want them to be able to do. I can greet my peers. If they did that, we stamped them. Okay, this is a way to bring that into your, and they love this. Do I get a stamp? These are high school juniors and seniors by and large, which is kind of amazing. I can introduce myself and provide basic information. Okay, and it's a nice little venue for moving then to the online testing. And then of course you have to have your personal goals, right, that they get to make on their own so that it becomes even more meaningful for them.
And just to add, right, to get that stamp, you want them to be able to do something. They have to prove that they can do these, right? And those are the things that go in LinguaFolio. Everyone always asks, what do I put in LinguaFolio Online? What do I put in there? The same things you would use to measure to click off right? To give them a
Right.
physical
So, Julie,
stamp.
I can introduce myself, provide basic personal information. What would they put in the LinguaFolio?
They could put in an audio file of an introduction. They could put in an image where the learner put in a description of themselves, a profile. They could put in a profile that they've drawn with markers, right? I've seen lots of examples where they create things about themselves, a photograph of that, a digital picture, and you can snap it and upload it right there.
Exactly.
And right then. Great.
We know that goals form the foundation for students' motivation in school. Working memory, amazingly, this is kind of one of my research interests, how short and how very limited working memories is. Remember the vocabulary thing? You can never learn more than 7 plus or minus 2 vocabulary words. This is absolutely true. But we also know that if we use images and dual coding, we can learn more. And we also know if we provide a context, we can learn more. So there are ways then to allocate that working memory by setting very specific goals that students will then focus on. When they see a chapter in a book, it's like cognitive overload. Whoa, the vocabulary, the grammar, the culture tip, where do I go? And the CanDo statements really focus them, and then the demonstration shows evidence that they've accomplished, which is very important, because one moment they think that I can do this, they will put in more effort. The more effort, the higher the achievement, the better the motivation, and the cycle starts. Okay, that's kind of the heart of what it's all about. We know that once we have a goal, we exert all of our effort in that direction, and they're highly individual. We can't assume that everyone has the same goals. You saw that with the bicycle metaphor. I would definitely not want to be an Olympian champion, but I would want to be able to use it effectively, maybe to go to work in my bicycle, okay? The important thing, just like when the first time you ever went to a foreign country, or in some cases, the first time you came to the United States, the first time you really notice the gap in your ability is when you're trying to produce language. And all of a sudden, that language is not there for you, and that's when you learn. Okay, so that's kind of, again, that is one of the essentials of LinguaFolio, is to kind of point out, ooh, I can't show this or demonstrate it. I better go back and rehearse this a bit more. And of course, the major whole underlying concept is self-assessment. We've got to go ahead with the next slide, I think. Too often we see students as subjects. I think this is a really important point. We see them as subjects of assessment rather than that the student is the primary user of assessment. And I think I get goosebumps when I say that, because I did a 5-year study you'll hear about a little bit, because the kids actually realized that they can do almost anything if the goal is absolutely intentional, focused, and they're allowed to demonstrate it and actually go back and see, where was I, where am I now? Okay, and I work mainly with inner city kids, so this was really a fascinating thing to see. The idea then eventually is they learn to self-assess, which, you know, when I was taking English, I took AP English, all our English teacher ever did was give us 2 grades, an A for whatever content and an A for grammar. There was no feedback. So how am I going to get any better? Right? And I couldn't self-assess because there was no feedback. But in this, it's built into the CanDo statements and then in the evidence that you present, because then you're going back and saying, how well can I do it? Can I do it easily? Somewhat easily? Not so much. I better work on this. Okay, that's kind of the whole idea. So here's the study. This was intended to be a 1-year study, and it turned into a decade of my life. I worked with 23 school districts where we introduced the LinguaFolio, and the only reason I'm going into this is I think it's important for you to know that this is a research-based intervention. It does work, okay? And so we did a study with 23 school districts, and we followed the same learners and the same teachers for 5 years. Okay, and I recorded all of their oral and their reading and their writing skills using STAMP, which comes out of Castles, okay? And in that study, we discovered that indeed there's a huge correlation between goal setting and achievement. Then we did another study at the college level with majors, college language majors, and basically we discovered that they had much higher motivation, they had much more respect for the value of the task, which is learning language. One of my doctoral students then did a study with the European language portfolio with 17 German teachers to see if the same study he had worked with me on at the university would hold true for teachers at the gymnasium, which is a high school. He had exactly the same results, okay? And you'll see that in a minute. And then the most fascinating one of all, Oksana Dema-Clark went into the same schools I worked with and looked to see if this goal setting transferred to science, math, and literacy. So if they developed these goal setting skills, did they get higher SAT, ACT scores in math, science, and literacy? And there was a correlation. It's a correlation, not a cause and effect, okay? So that's important. All right, I just love putting up this slide because it took me so long to do this. And basically you can see the level of significance is less than 0.01. What that means is 99.9%. If you do the goal setting, you will indeed be able to see those results, okay? Just kind of a fun slide. So we know basically from the research that these are kind of the results. There was increased mastery learning, meaning they were intrinsically motivated. Okay? We know that I already mentioned the fact that they valued it more. There was a more accurate self-assessment of their ability, and student beliefs correlated to teacher beliefs, which was very interesting. So the more they used LinguaFolio, the better the results. So here's kind of the best results were the student evaluation. The more they used it, the higher they valued it, the more rapport they had, which is kind of interesting. It goes back to the idea of you don't really, you don't care what someone knows until you know they care. If they really like their teacher was one of the results, which was kind of interesting. Task value again, okay, just a different way to look at it. Go ahead and click again. One of the things, just to kind of sum up here, the effects basically on learner achievement, I kind of developed this as a comparison, is that the principles of assessment for learning, okay, plus LinguaFolio were 4 to 5 times more effective than reduced class size, which is, of course, on the front burner right now, reducing class size. That's pretty powerful because it's individual. They're setting their own can-dos with the help of the teacher. Okay, and here's the formula for success. Set your goals, document your progress, self-assess equals student achievement. It's true if you think about your own life. We set your goal, I want to go ahead and get my master's degree. Here's what I have to do. I have to see how well I'm doing it. And eventually you just keep on going and you keep going back to how well am I doing until you achieve your goal.
And when we think of this in terms of the StarTalk programs for the summer, one of the key features then is ensuring that this goal setting and documentation of this is part of the program itself. It's not something a student assistant does for all of the students. It's not something you do as the instructor uploading all the evidence for all of your students. They do it. It's integrated in their portfolio. They make the choices about the evidence that you put up. Something we see a lot is like, well, I have my assistant, here's all the evidence, and it takes us, 20 hours to put this up at the end of the program, which isn't what we're talking about, right? The pedagogical value is what we really want to see in the use of this tool. And this is the formula that is designed to facilitate within your program, right? And so following this is what we really want to help happen and sort of help you do that within the program itself.
Just like LinguaFolio, the role of the teacher shifts.
Exactly.
You are the facilitator. You are the architect of the curriculum. You are the one who kind of determines what can-do statements do I need, but now let them personalize these so that they are more meaningful to their particular life situation.
Exactly.
So here's how to start, okay? This is just a quick overview of how to really begin. The 5 C's you all know, and then what I would say, the first thing you do is identify the standards when you're developing your curriculum. Identify the 11 standards under the 5 C's. Then go on and identify the level of language from novice low to distinguished. I think most of us will be in the very low end of that. And then identify which mode of communication am I going to use as you're developing your little stamp goals. And then identify the sources of evidence that you think might be appropriate. And then plan your learning tasks. This is where the teacher function comes in. And then have them return to the CanDo statement. So I'm going to give you an example. This is essentially backward design, I know you've heard a lot about this. Your CanDo statements are your backward design. That's going to drive your instruction. What are the goals? Okay, you're going to be able to introduce yourself in 2 different social situations. And you're going to then decide, okay, what evidence is acceptable? How will the teacher and you know that you've reached the goal? And then plan the experiences, which is where I'm going to give you one example of kind of overview.
And again, this is what you're doing anyway, right? It's what you do from your curriculum template. It's the targets and the performance measures that you want to happen. And so really use this as your planning guide, because that's what helps facilitate this whole process. And your LinguaFolio online account should mirror this. It's why you can customize them. It's why you can break them down by group. It's why it allows you to do things so that you can really focus on those specific learning targets, right, and outcomes.
So here are your standards. Okay, I'm going to decide which mode am I going to work in? Interpersonal, interpretive, presentational. Okay, that's decision number 1. Then you're going to say, okay, what mode of communication? So these are the primary, I work very heavily with AP, ETS. These are the 6 we use for our AP exam. And they're really very concrete. Are we going to work on spoken interpersonal or written? That's important to know. Are we going to do audio visual interpretive, film, whatever? Or are we going to do a print? Are we going to do a spoken presentational or a written? Okay? And then you go to the CanDo statements. This is where it all begins. This is where it has taken the work away from the teacher. Go to the CanDo statements, and you can then click on, and you'll actually see the level of, you can click on, I'm at novice low, I want to work in interpersonal speaking, and you can actually see the CanDo statements on the actual site. And all you have to do then is just use those. It's awesome.
And then those are exactly mirrored right in the LinguaFolio online as well. So you just click them off and they automatically come up and customize for your program once you've selected those for each group, right?
Yeah, super.
Okay.
So here's a classroom example. So I chose something kind of banal here. Here's my outcome is an interpersonal novice high. Okay, so they've been in school for maybe a couple semesters. I can ask and give simple directions based on familiar topics, and I can tell someone where something is located, okay? So here's what I'm going to do. So here's my task. The student is staying in Munich with a family, and they're doing a semester abroad, and they really want to visit these 2 places they've heard so much about in the German classroom, the Glockenspiel, located at the Marienplatz, and the Hofbräuhaus, a popular tourist spot. And so the classmate, one of her classmates texts her and says, I want to go with you. Okay? And so to join her at the Marienplatz. But the classmate lives at the Olympiaplatz. So explain to her how to get from there to the Marienplatz via the subway. Also explain that in case you don't meet up, how to get from the Marienplatz to the Hofbräuhaus. Okay? So it's not an easy task. All right, so using a subway map of Munich, partner A has a highlighted path. Okay? Provides oral direction to partner B, who highlights the path on her map provided by partner A. Partner B provides directions to another location using the Munich subway map, peer and self-assessment. Okay? Immediately they're getting feedback and all that negotiation. It's an information gap activity. And here's my favorite phrase, nobody gets left out of a pair. There isn't the small group where group number 3, person number 3 and number 4 get left out, okay? So what does the teacher have to do? She finds on the web the U-Bahn in Munich, okay, so pretty easy. And she finds the map on how to get from the Marienplatz to the Hofbräuhaus. So you're bringing in authentic materials, so they're learning some culture along with that, okay? And the teacher then has to scaffold the tasks that allow the learner to be able to accomplish that task. Vygotsky, zone of proximal development. You are helping that person step by step get to where they need to do it until they can do it independently. So you introduce the vocabulary. You know, if I were doing this, I would do this with you. You can do TPR, you can do images, however you prefer to introduce the vocabulary. You have an authentic map, etc. Okay, and here's some, for example, some scaffolded tasks to move them from input, have them practice with TPR, have them sit back to back as they give each other directions, okay? Have them practice with a map, have them trace their route from home to school and describe it to a partner. Have them trace the route from the language classroom to the gym, wherever level you're at. Have a scavenger hunt in school based on written directions. There are lots of ways to get kids involved in actually doing that before they present their evidence. So then you provide written or oral directions and students demonstrate that, and this is then your evidence to document your CanDo statements to reflect that they're able to carry out that activity. So then you return to your CanDo statements and you decide, okay, at what level did I perform this, okay?
And again, this isn't anything you're not asked to do already. It's just a way to set up the things that are happening in your curriculum template. This is stage 3, right? The process that Ali just described are those steps. And then that evidence goes directly into learners' LinguaFolio online portfolios, right? So right there, you have an option to include all kinds of different pieces of evidence based on the CanDo that you're targeting. So it can be a written sample, it can be an audio file, it can be a picture file, it can be now direct video upload. Those of you who've been working with LinguaFolio online for a long time, you no longer have to create YouTube accounts or any of that. It's all going to be on servers.
Oh, cool.
Direct video upload, a PDF document. So for this particular task, what kinds of things would be good evidence of this CanDo? What kinds of things could you do for the task that Ali just described? Anyone have an idea? What would you upload here to document this performance?
Well, it depends a little on whether you were envisioning it as an interpersonal communication, in which case it's like I got the map and I'm kind of explaining, well, you see how you're going to go straight down that street and turn right and get to the da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Or it could be presentational, where in essence the person's holding the map, explaining and recording all of that, but there's not any interaction in between.
Yeah? Any other ideas? And then I'll comment on that.
I guess, could you ask the students to have their phone ready to just record next to them while they're doing this? Does that disrupt the flow of the activity?
Nope, that's the whole idea of the mobile application. They just start up their portfolios, zoop, right there, and then it goes right up into their portfolio directly in the classroom. So,
would it suffice just to have the audio for this? Or
Yeah.
do we want to ask them to also take a snapshot?
I think the audio is just fine. Yeah, the audio is great.
Well, if they wanted to do a video with their iPhone, which is apparently all kids do these days, all day long, they could have one partner do the first part and record it, and then the other partner would do the second part, and then you would have each student doing the asking questions and the giving directions, and that's 2 pieces, or is that 4 pieces of evidence?
Exactly. So all of these layered on top, what's so great is any one of those. You could also take an image of the maps with the correct paths highlighted. That could count, right? That's the successful outcome of a good information gap activity. The great part is the students could actually choose. You pick what you want to put up as your evidence. So what a good colleague of mine and I work on a lot called structured unpredictability. We want to give students agency, we want to give them choice, but we know we need these things to happen. So my structure is, here's our outcome, here's our CanDo, here are all the scaffolded tasks, and you decide, do you want audio, video, an image, and any one of those things can serve as your evidence for LinguaFolio online. The trick is it should happen as the process is happening, not a week later, right? Not 5 days later. Should happen right then as they're thinking about it.
Yeah, when we think about motivation theory, Julie, you know, we think that the 3 most important elements, one of which is autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Those are the three things that motivate us. Relational, we know that. If we have someone to work with, we have a group of individuals with whom we can really achieve together, that motivates us, okay? And competence, when we feel we can achieve something, we are motivated to do more. Especially with kids today, where I'm in schools almost every day, a lot of what I would say lack of engagement is occurring because they are not attending to really the kind of instruction oftentimes that we see. You know, I call it doing learning unto learners rather than by learners. I think that's an important, and what LinguaFolio does with the autonomy, it allows them, as Julie said, to really select and personalize what they have learned and be able then to continue to see over time how that has improved. It's fun to go back and take a look then at what did I do last year, and they can do that. And that's a great exercise to have of self-assessment again. Have them do that work. This is not about, and I know this is where the criticism I've heard at StarTalk, it's so much work. The students, okay? My question always, and Sherry gets really tired of this, who's doing the work? If you're up there being Atlas, holding up the globe, you know, I used to do that when I was a PhD in German literature. I would prepare these amazing lectures for 10 hours, and I noticed that eventually the students stopped reading the text. And I didn't quite get that, okay? And so then I said, next week, you know what you're going to do? You're going to come up with 6 questions that are unanswered by the main character that you want to know. And the whole complexion of that class changed from me to them. And that was kind of the aha moment for me. And that's what LinguaFolio has done for the kids in these districts that I worked with. It empowered them in a sense, really. So really, we want to help learners really reflect on their own learning. This is something that's very hard to get at. You know, I can remember my own son. I love telling this story. When he was, you know, when you're a teacher, educator, you want your kid to really be a reflective learner. Well, this was not good. And so I said, well, you got your essay done. He said, I'm done. I said, well, can I read it? He goes, no, I'm done. I said, well, was there a rubric? No, I'm done. He didn't care about the quality of the work. And so he was missing that whole piece of how to get better, which is, of course, what we're at. So the 5 questions that Lenny Dam always asks is, what am I learning? Okay. Why am I learning it? Which LinguaFolio kind of tells you. How am I learning it? Okay. How successful is my learning? Self-assessment. And what am I going to do next? So that reflection process really gives them a deeper understanding to interpret their own learning, essentially. That's kind of the idea. So here's kind of the roadmap, and this is available, I understand, on StarTalk, so you can access this PowerPoint. You set your learning goals, you select the strategies you're going to use, then you're going to go through and provide the evidence that will document that learning. You'll self-assess, you'll notice and reflect, and it continues again. The next slide, this works better. This is one I did with my teachers in the 23 districts. They liked this better. What do I know? Okay. What do I want to know? What have I learned? And then I added the S. What do I still want to learn? Which is important. Because you may have conquered that you can greet, but now you need to add the layer of sociolinguistics, when is it appropriate to say X, Y, and Z, and when is it not? So there's always that piece. So imagine you're working with one of these 3 in your classroom. What would a lesson look like, and what would be useful evidence? I can greet my peers.
Yeah, so what we're hoping is you do a little bit of work.
Yep.
Right? So we're going to give you some time to think about how you could think about this process and the cycle that we've been talking about, and pick one of these 3. You don't have to do all 3. We tried to pick ones that are sort of tied to what most programs are doing. So you'll get 5 minutes. Look about what would you want that lesson to look like, and what would the evidence, what are possible pieces of evidence that your learners would have at the end of that scaffolded task. All right, so maybe just by table, we'll give you about 5 minutes to do some work. You don't get a lot of time to do this, but we'll give you about 5 minutes.
That's okay. These are all experts. They don't need a lot of time.
They've got it covered.
Yep.
All right. right, we're ready.
Okay, so thinking about the task I can make plans with others, we were thinking our program is Russian Heritage High School level, so they're above novice high. On the other hand, they have holes sometimes in their language, and sometimes we don't know where to find that. So if the idea was, okay, so you need to make plans with some other students for Thursday for lunchtime. And so maybe you're doing one of those charts like Mimi likes to use, where you go and find out who would like to go to what kind of restaurant, you figure out, or bring lunch, or where you'd go on campus to sit, and then you find 2 or 3 people that you've agreed you want to get together with. So now you're working out the details. Do we meet after class? Do we have to do something first? If we order pizza, will we share it? Who's gonna bring money? Who's gonna bring this? And so wherever it takes them, it could take them, and then they could record that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So evidence then from that would be the recorded conversation. Could also be an image of the chart or PDF. You just click right there. I know one of the problems that traditionally sometimes, what do we do with the written text? The learner, take a picture. We put that digital image up in the portfolio. What other evidence could happen? One more. Maybe just a description by the learner of, even in their, native language or expert language of, hey, we did this and the restaurant we picked was this, and here's something related to that, right? So it could be a quick description of the restaurant that fits with a different can-do, right? There are some tests that are going to show and fit with different can-dos, and that's okay. The same piece of evidence could demonstrate multiple competencies, right? All right, anything else anyone's dying to share? We're going to kind of move forward unless you want some feedback or have an idea that everyone should hear for sure. No? All right. So we've talked a lot about sample evidence, right? So there's video. The other thing a lot of people have used, and we're not going to actually look at these just for time's sake, but sock puppet videos, animations that happen. So some work with some digital literacy as well. If you have access to that, that can also happen on a mobile device. There's lots of great programs you can use, especially if there's a program where you're really concerned about some things online in a digital space, right? There's lots of ways sort of to make that happen. And you can watch these online in the session there up there.
Exactly. So what are some of the added benefits when you integrate the CanDo statements, or what I would call the LinguaFolio? So authenticity, it makes the learning process transparent to everyone. Okay? These are our goals. Okay? It's authentic functional language, and it's the communicative approach, and more importantly, part of that, of course, is task-based, meaning you actually have to do something with language. It's not just an activity, but you have to actually perform something with language. And it's learner-centeredness. You have your general communicative goals, plus then your personalized goals. Motivation, it focuses on what learners can do, not cannot do, which is, of course, an up. And it mitigates that learning anxiety that you have when you have short and long-term goals, because they can continue to work on them. I can do this with help. I need to work on this and go back and try again. And it's criterion referenced rather than norm. The learner autonomy, an important part of motivation. Self-monitoring. These are the things kids need. They need to be able to know at what level am I able to do these things. And of course, it promotes self-reflection and self-assessment. And most important, they actually take ownership of their learning. It's not done unto them. Okay? And then achievement, they increase their proficiency, we know that, and their academic achievement. We know that from the research. And so that's one of the things I think is really important when we talk with our administrators and our parents, that we emphasize that this is a research-based, proven intervention that shows that there is a correlation between good goal setting and learning achievement.
And in order to help facilitate this process, now you have a fully functional mobile application. The tech isn't the important part. The important part is you have a tool that you can take on field trips, you can take to museums, you can take wherever you're working with your learners without having to do a separate lab. Works on both iOS and Android devices to do this kind of reflection right there as they're working. You can directly upload videos, what they're used to doing anyway, right? Selfies are around for a reason. That vocabulary exists for a reason. And we call it co-constructed behavior, right? The technology is there and people do different things. People start to do different things and our technology changes and they sort of happen simultaneously. And so this is there. Something that's important to remember is make sure you get the StarTalk version. You have a very special version. It's got all these extra added features and so it looks blue when you download that app, right? Again, the idea is that this can happen and all of these great benefits, which is the reason we do this kind of work, not to use fancy tools, right? The reason we do this kind of work is we know that facilitating reflection and goal setting is a key part of good classroom learning. And so this is there to help make that happen for you in your program.
I love this. I got this off the internet. This is the comic version of Vygotsky here, right? I won't do it, which we're seeing a lot of. I can't do it, a lot of that too, but going to I want to do it, but how do I do it? And I'll try to do it. I can do it. I will do it. Yes, I did it, right? But my very favorite slide, if I have the belief that I can do it, I shall surely acquire the capacity to do it, even if I may not have it at the beginning. And my let's go back to our can-dos. You think you can explain how can-dos increase learner achievement? 5, 4. Okay, good. Can you explain the benefits of can-do statements? All right, we did that one, yay. Do you think you can design curriculum and learning tasks that integrate them? 5, 4. Okay. Can you describe LFO and how it's used in programs with learners? Okay. And can you implement LFO in your upcoming program? Okay. And you can always email Julie. She'll love this.
Or come
okay.
to the if the technical piece is the part that's hard, come to the session later, right? There's a technical that just looks at this is how you click, this is where you log in, those kinds of things, right? That's there. We have it on the program.
And you know what I've done in ours, actually it was Sherry that did this. We have a technical specialist, we call it, as part of our staff in each one of our institutes, and they're responsible for all of that. So that it doesn't become everyone's responsibility. Okay, and then I think there's one more slide. Everybody remembers this book from their youth. I Knew You Could, right? The little train that said it could, exactly. So any questions or anything? We have a couple more minutes. If you have any questions, the PowerPoint is up. There'll be a video to review if you want to review this yet again.
And also on your way out, we'll do questions. Carl Bernstein, our technical specialist who builds a lot of this stuff and built the mobile app, is in the back. He can answer questions, but he also has logins. So if you don't have your program director's login or it's not the right person, he has all of those for those of you who don't have them. So on your way out, you're welcome to get those from him on your way out. And thank you for all of your work in doing all of this, Carl. So open it for questions.
My question actually is the review function that's in LinguaFolio. I assume it's there in the new version?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's actually better and exciting, I think. You'll like it.
Okay. So some of what we've had challenges with in the past around the review part is that, well, first of all, it was anonymous, so you didn't really know whose work you were reviewing as a teacher, which is plus and minus. I mean, there's parts of it that are good if it's totally learner autonomous. But if you're trying to understand now how am I going to meet their needs, you don't know which one it was that had the issue. So is it still anonymous?
No.
Okay. Oh, great. And so
That was a quick answer.
once you reviewed it, well, first of all, to be able to review it, the student had to set up that the work could
No.
be shared. So it's just automatically available. Okay, good. And then the other thing was that once you reviewed it as a teacher or whoever reviewer, it was gone. Like you didn't see it in a list of something you could go back and look at. So
Now you can see that. And you actually have a whole new activity feed that looks kind of like a Facebook feed, like any sort of media feed that shows you activity that's happening. That can be sorted by learner, by can do, by type of evidence. The review, you can review. It's 2 clicks max. That's our new rule, not drilling down. All of that is there. It's not as sophisticated as we'd like, something that you use for grading, those kinds of things. But really, it's there to review and give them comments and feedback, those kind. Yeah.
that's fantastic. So the other thing, just in the question of whether you use audio or video or something, I think for us what we came to was that, especially to try to do any assessment of something like reading or something like that, especially reading, you kind of wanted to have a visual of what the person was reading while you heard what they were reading or what they said about it. So you have the whole context. Otherwise, if they just read something and it was all audio, you don't really know the context of what it was they were doing, or whether or if all they record is, oh, I read this book and I like this part, or da-da-da-da. Like, I don't know what it was that you were looking at. So if I could at least see the text that they saw, even if all they record is their commentary on it, then I feel like as a reviewer I have more legitimate things to share.
So meaning two pieces, two files with one.
No, I'm just suggesting that that's why I would favor video. And
yeah, of course. So now you have that, right? You have complete video upload. It can all be recorded right there, in-house, either mobile or online, either way.
So the thing is, I think in terms of the guidance to the students is, if the teachers are thinking about, if they're interested in providing feedback and review, how would they prefer to have the students upload things so you actually have what you need in order to do a decent job in reviewing? If it's totally student-driven, then they'll do whatever they want. But if you're hoping to review.
Yeah. And so one thing we've done is we actually help learners make those choices. So we find that that choice making actually is instructional as well. It's not about meeting some need for some requirement, right? It's about, how do I want to show off what I learned, and how do I think about what matters to me? And so, yeah, absolutely, that should be part of that process. I totally agree.
21st century
Thank you.
skills.
Exactly.
Any other questions? And yes.
I have a question, but it's not really for StarTalk. I also teach at middle school and high school. And I was wondering, our school is shifting towards SBLG, standards based on grading. I've seen so many parallels between the CanDo statements and the benchmarks that we're trying to evaluate students by, and it's very new, and it's kind of like tricky for world language teachers because we have different languages. And I was wondering if LinguaFolio works with those schools, because I know you said it's also for school districts. If there's any collaboration.
Yeah, so we have a non-StarTalk version of LinguaFolio online that can be used. It's used right now in South Carolina, in, I don't know, all over, different districts all over. Washington has some. I don't want to name, I'll forget someone, so I'm not naming them all. But it's used all over, and we're using it for all kinds of different ways to meet exactly what you're talking about.
Like rubric, like helps for creating rubrics to go with these, like.
So they're already created. They're based on the Necessful Actful CanDo Statements, which has a rubric that it's all national based. Everyone, although maybe doesn't agree with everything, has reached a consensus that this is what's going to happen sort of across the country. So it's great because you don't actually have to reinvent the wheel.
Right. And they have like rubric samples or things like that.
Go to the website on Actful, the Necessful, on the first slide, there was a picture of what it looks like. And what the nice thing is, you can zero in right on the level that they're at, and they have rubrics, and they actually have explanations as well, and little case studies. Everything is included there for you. And you know, one of the things is, when you look at whatever your standards are in your district or in your particular department, you can take a look at the CanDo statements and kind of do a cross-reference and say, where do they match, and then decide which of those CanDos you want. You can't do them all. And then you ask the students which ones. I mean, this is the part we got to learn to let go of, is that control. You know, we think we're teachers and we're in control, but you know, right now you could be thinking about what's for dinner tonight while I'm talking. I'm not in control. Okay, so you have to let the students begin to think about what they want to learn. And then, you know, that has to be a part of the driving process too. Get rid of the mandated, but integrate that with what they want to learn.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you. You've been small group, but you've been great.
Thanks.
Thanks.
You. Have a great day.